This is our blessed brother, Richard Robert Wood. Just, just on a point of reference.
No fun.
Continue.
All right. Anyway, I wanted to tell the stories about when I got my first job. I applied. I had a cousin who was in the Navy, and I worshipped him. You know, he was about 17, and I was 13 or 14.
Yep.
Just like a brother. And he was in the Navy, so I thought he was pretty cool. So I applied to join the Navy.
Right.
And went to the interviews and that after third year high.
Mm-hmm.
Third year. And I only, look, it was 15 years old, you know. It's September, so in September I was still 14, right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
You mean 1962, was it?
Oh, 61 or something. Anyway, my mum had a shop and we had a phone in the shop. We didn't have a phone in the house. She got a phone call from the high school must have been about the end of January, February, you know, when the kids are coming back to school.
Yeah.
And it's from the school. And the deputy headmaster said, come down to the school to discuss whether I was going to come back to do my leaving, which is 2 years matriculation,
Right.
or what was I doing with my life. And so I thought, oh well, so off I go down there. And the headmaster, he must, I don't know how many times I got the cane in 3 years, but a fair amount. And he was often, as you know, those sort of headmasters you have, they've got this very high blood pressure and very red face.
That's right.
You know, and they've been running a high school. They were at Midland High. There would have been over 1,000 kids.
Yeah.
And they're all rough.
All rough.
It's a rough. Midland's a rough
area.
Little town.
Yeah.
What they call these days working class.
Sure.
They never used words like that back then, but tough guys.
Many indigenous families?
Indigenous people, actually, there is a trucking place in Guildford called Bell Brothers.
Right.
A truck depot, and all the Aboriginals lived in the bush behind it, in humpies. It was pretty shocking. Our school bus used to go past there.
Right.
It's right near the cemetery, Guildford Cemetery, and there would have been a tribe there of, I'd say 30 to 50, on and off. And they had a pretty terrible life. If they were drinking men, they'd go to Guildford and get pissed at the pub. And the women they're with would go to Guildford and be prostitutes mainly.
Oh no.
And pretty rough life.
Right.
But that's Guildford, but that's near Midland. And they didn't go to school.
None?
Well, the church would come in, and I can remember Midland in the 60s. I can't remember any Aboriginal kids in that school.
Right.
But there was an orphanage.
Orphanage?
Yeah, there was an orphanage across the river, and it was called a church orphanage.
Mm-hmm.
And it had a name, you know, Saint something or other.
St. Mary's.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
So they went over and probably grabbed some of those kids and cleaned them up and gave them jumpers and stuff. And I think some of them came in with the orphan kids.
Mm-hmm.
But they were extremely odd, you know, like they'd only be... That bus, I can only just go from memory of the bus. How many kids can you fit on a bus?
60?
No, it wasn't as big a bus as that.
40?
Maybe.
Yeah.
So there would have been only 6 or 7 of those kids.
Right.
So 6 or 7 amongst 1,200 is not very many.
No.
That's Australia in Perth, Midland in the 60s. There was a mission up at Magumba, which is a Catholic mission called Magumba Mission,
Right.
but that's further up the creek.
Mhm.
That was a very strict mission, very strict.
For the girls or the boys? Or
Both.
Both. All right.
Yeah. The missions, the Catholic missions, the two main mission groups were the Catholics are the main mission groups, and the Methodists.
Right.
Yeah, the two
Yeah.
different religious groups.
Sure.
But I had a friend whose mother worked there.
Chris, please don't put the TV on because it'll be copyrights on the phone. Whatever Google pickups, okay, it will be.
Okay. Oh, this is gonna be.
That's right, and we don't want any lawsuits. All right, so
Lawsuits.
I'll explain later.
All right.
Okay, now.
Oh God.
Richard.
Now I've forgotten what you were asking.
No, I remind you humbly.
Anyway, my school
Principal.
headmaster,
That's
the
right.
deputy principal. His name was. I found out they're quite an important family from Albany.
Yeah.
He said, "Do you know that you and Rossi Holmes, the only two kids out of your class, third year,
Yeah.
who actually got 8 subjects in your junior certificate?" He said, "The rest of your mob
Mm-hmm.
in that school," he was pretty rough with his language, he said, hardly anyone got over 5 subjects. He said, "How is it," you know what teachers are like,
Right.
"how is it, Wood, one of the most rebellious kids that I've had to deal with in this school, gets all the marks?"
Lovely.
And I said, "I have no idea, sir."
Yeah.
He said, "So what are you going to do with it, boy?" And I said, "I'm joining the Navy, sir." And he said, he just leaned across the table and he sort of said, "No, you're not." You see, I didn't have a father, right? These guys must instinctively know.
Right. Right.
And I said, "Beg your pardon?"
We are not.
I said, he said, "You are not joining the Navy." And I said, "Well, I want to get a job. I don't want to come back to school."
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Okay then." He said, "Well, you're not suited to being under authoritarian rule."
Can you imagine?
No, true.
Yeah,
It's virtually,
yeah.
You know, I'm going, yeah, duh. And then he says, he gets a bit of paper. I tell you what, it was only about that big.
Right.
And he said, he writes his name on there like this and gives me this. And he said, "Monday morning," he said, "get a haircut, get some decent clothes on and go and see this guy.
In the council?
No, go and see this man."
Whereabouts?
It was at the barracks up in top of the St George's Terrace.
Right.
And I said, "Who is it, sir?" And he said, "Civil service for you, boy." I didn't know the difference between civil service.
Yeah.
And he said, "Not the military."
Right.
Okay. Again, I didn't know anything about shit like that. I mean, how do you know if
That's
you're a kid?
right. Yeah.
You don't.
Yeah.
And so off I went. I went home and saw Mum, and Mum said, "Well, you know, give it a shot."
Yeah.
And the reason was because I could draw.
Right.
I got top marks for art. And so I went in for the interview at the Public Works, which is about 70 to 100 architects and draftsmen and engineers in that building. You know, really big drawing office, massive. And the boss's name was Leo Clark. And Leo was lion-like, you know, like he had hair that sort of was like a lion, you know, or you look at him,
Right.
you know, those sorts of guys, and very gruff. Today you're not even allowed to be bloody gruff, you know.
Yeah.
But he was gruff. He had 100 bloody men to, he's building hospitals and fire stations and God knows what. He's in charge of a lot of responsibility.
Right.
And he said, yeah, it's very good. He said, look, I can't give you a job in the drawing office. He said, because you're too young. You've got to be 16 to be a cadet here. He said, but I'll give you a job as an office boy. And I said, no. And he said, boom, 8:30 next week, turn up at this address. And that's what I did. And that was school's drawing office. Best job in the world. £6.5 a week. I mean, no kids in Perth.
That kind of money.
Good money, mate. I mean,
Yeah.
the Navy would have only paid about £5 a week.
Yeah.
And you risk your life. But I only realised 40 years later, the Vietnam War was about to start, or had just started. I never knew. I mean, how would I know? I'm a kid.